Hey friend, do you want to offer meaningful learning solutions that create behavior change, fit in the flow of work, and yield real results for your nonprofit? If yes, this is the podcast for you. Join me as I explore instructional design and leadership development best practices, as well as change management, belonging, and influence. If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I've been in your shoes. I'm a learning and development consultant and founder of Skill Masters Market. Before starting my business, I led learning and leadership development initiatives for a large national nonprofit. I know what it's like to need to develop your staff quickly and effectively and to build the relationships and cut through the organizational layers to be successful. And I'm bringing all of that to you in this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's learning for good. You are a highly productive, successful individual contributor. You have mastered your craft and people respect you. So you're promoted to manager. Now suddenly you're managing the people who were previously your peers. You're trying to transition from doing the work to leading the work. And you face all new challenges. You look around, there's no one there to support you. As an individual contributor, you could walk over to your coworker's desk or hit them up on Slack. But as a new manager, you find yourself alone. No training, no peer group, no support. This happens far too often in organizations. And then when those new managers fail or burn out, we say they didn't have what it took. They weren't management material. But that's just not true. You may have experienced this transition yourself. You know we can do more to support new managers. And we should. When Crew, a faith-based nonprofit, faced this exact challenge, they decided to offer a coaching program to their emerging leaders. But it's not just any coaching program. This coaching program would bring in business leaders from outside their organization and engage them as coaches, creating cross-sector support, cross-sector relationships, and cross-sector sharing. Joining me today is Bob Tiede, who helped start this program 20 plus years ago. He still manages the program today, and I can't wait to hear more about how this program works and what benefits they've seen in their organization. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Bob Tiede has been on the staff of Crew, formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ, for 54 years. Serving 8 years in Crew campus and then 24 years as the CEO of Josh McDowell Ministry, a division of Crew. And now 22 years on the U.S. leadership development team, developing the next generation of leaders for Crew. Bob's blog, leadingwithquestions.com, is now in its 12th year and followed by leaders in over 200 countries. Bob has written 6 very popular books, including Great Leaders Ask Questions, a Fortune 100 list, and Now That's a Great Question. And his newest book is the 3rd edition of Leading with Questions, which has been Amazon's #1 bestseller in the category of business communication. Bob's mission is to help leaders everywhere multiply their leadership effectiveness times 10 by moving them from let me tell you to let me ask you. Bob has been married to Sherry for 55 years, is the proud dad of 4 adult children, all married, and 9 incredible grandchildren, all who love to ask their Papa Bob questions. Sounds like you're passing down that question gene. That's so fun. Welcome to the show.
We are certainly trying to, Heather.
I love that. And I love that we get to meet you today. We get to hear more about your life's work and also just hear more about how you're developing leaders over at Crew as well. So thank you for joining us.
Again, my pleasure. Been looking forward to this time, Heather.
Great. So I like to ask everybody a little bit about their career first. It's one thing to read a bio and share some of the highlights, but often there's so much more that goes into a career journey. So tell us a little bit about your career journey.
Well, Heather, your friend Bob obviously has no ability to get a new job, meaning We've now been with Crew 54 years. We joined in 1971, my wife and I, days after we graduated from the University of South Dakota. And at that time, we thought, hey, we'll do this for a few years and see what happens. Well, it's 54 years later, and we've been having the time of our lives. Every year has been an incredible, another chapter. Crew is where we raised our family, and now we're raising our grandkids. It's been so much fun. We enjoyed those 8 years in campus ministry. And then in 1979, the national director of Crew at that time played matchmaker and brought Josh McDowell and myself together. And for the next 24 years, privileged to work with Josh. Of course, Josh McDowell Ministry is a division of Crew. And Heather, during those years, the doors to Russia opened and led 18 major mission trips in the 90s, early 2000s to Russia, taking 300 to 400 American volunteers at a time. We could fill hours and hours of the stories of what God did in those days. And the doors to Cuba opened, led 4 mission trips to Cuba. But we stepped away from that role in 2003. We took a sabbatical. Crew brought us 7 opportunities. The one that resonated with us was leadership development, and have been on the U.S. leadership development team, also serving our global leadership development efforts since 2004, and absolutely love what I'm doing. A little bit of not a detour, but I hope an interesting story. In the scriptures, many people have said the word retire does not appear. Well, I actually found that it does in the NIV. I was a number of years ago reading through the NIV, and the Old Testament came to Numbers chapter 8, its instruction to Levites. And it says at age 25, they may begin their work of service in the temple. At age 50, they must retire. In black and white, it says retire at age 50. But then reading on, it says, but they, meaning the Levites who had to retire at age 50, but they may continue to assist their younger brethren, yet they themselves must not do the work of service. Now, Heather, that is instruction to Levites. That's not a command for all believers everywhere. But as I read it, I smiled. I had stepped away. I was 55, I think, when I stepped away from leading Josh McDowell Ministry. And it wasn't based on this verse. I saw this in hindsight. And what I saw, though, was the Levites who, and again, keep in mind, they were ceremonial butchers. It was hard work. They weren't just burning a little incense. I say at times, there's no requirement in the National Football League that you have to retire before 50. But there's nobody playing after. It's hard work. But then that next verse, but you may continue to assist younger brethren. I smiled and thinking, hey, that's kind of what I've done. I stepped away from having a responsibility for a division, but ever since I've been coming alongside younger leaders and absolutely having the time of my life. Heather, one more story. Our new president for Crew is David Robbins. David was in our first leadership development group, Emerging Leaders, in 2005 to 7. And our mission was to develop the next generation of leaders for Crew. And when he got announced as our new president, I smiled and thanked the Lord, thinking, yes, that mission is being fulfilled.
It's awesome. It's awesome when you can actually start to see the impact of your work. So I'm excited because we're going to dive into a particular program that you offer to develop leaders at Crew. I think there's so much to learn from that, and that's definitely something that could apply across the sector as other organizations are thinking about how they develop their leaders. Before we do that, can you just tell us a little bit about Crew? Like, what is your mission? Just so we have that context of who the organization is, and then dive into that program.
Well, Crew, former name Campus Crusade for Christ, was founded in 1951 at UCLA by Bill and Vanette Bright, our founders. And from early, the mission was to help fulfill the Great Commission in this generation. And so our focus has been to help fulfill the Great Commission. Crew now has ministries in some 190 countries. Worldwide, we have a staff of 15,000 plus and a multitude of volunteers and, of course, many students involved. But as the ministry matured, probably over 50% of our staff are still working on campuses. But we now have staff focused on reaching athletes, staff focused on reaching leaders. The Jesus film, which has been a major part of Campus Crusade for Christ, has been translated into more languages than any film in history. I forget the exact number. I know it's well over 1,000 translations. And all a part of Cru, and everything we do, though, is focused on helping to fulfill the Great Commission in this generation.
Hey, Learning for Good listener. I appreciate you joining me each week to get tips and tricks for nonprofit L&D pros. I love sharing my experience and bringing you top guests from the field. But I'm not the only one doing the work around here. This podcast is edited and produced by my friends at Idea Blossoms. Idea Blossoms partners with consultants and organizations who either have or want to start a podcast. They do everything from the initial podcast launch to monthly podcast management and can support you with audio and video editing, as well as content repurposing if you want to share key ideas through blogs or newsletters or social media. I'm sharing this for two reasons. One, I am so grateful for Idea Blossoms and how they help me bring episodes to you each week. But two, I know many of you have or have considered offering a podcast as part of your learning strategy. As a key contributor and sponsor of this podcast, Idea Blossoms is offering an exclusive 30% discount for Learning for Good listeners, applied to the first invoice. They have 2 spots open for 2025, so head to ideablossoms.com or email Rosa at ideablossoms.com to get started. You can find links in the show notes. And don't forget to mention the Learning for Good podcast to claim this incredible offer.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with Cru, so I just wanted to have that context as we start to think about this cross-sector coaching program. I know you and I talked previously, we talked about your work at Cru, and we talked about your work with Leading with Questions. And the cross-sector coaching program is one of the many things that stood out to me as we talked. I just think there's so much that we can learn from what you're doing there. So who is this coaching program for? And then what is it intended to do?
Let's go back to 2004 when we were meeting U.S. Leadership Development Team. Please know I'm part of a great team. This is not Bob by himself. It's a team effort. But we're meeting in 2004 and we were planning the first leadership development program for emerging leaders. I'll give you a little context. In Cru, we certainly had training for new staff. We also had training for new campus directors. But beyond that, we really didn't have training. And so, for example, we could say, hey, Heather, great campus director at Auburn. Let's make her the Alabama director. We had no training for that, but we would throw you in the deep end of the pool. And if you swam, we'd pat ourselves on the back. Man, we made a great choice. If you drowned, we backed away from the pool and said, I guess Heather didn't have what it took. Like it's not our fault. Well, the reality, Heather, it is our fault. It is the fault of any organization that doesn't prepare and help leaders moving to the next level to prepare them to lead at that level. And so we were missing that. So the training program we were focused on in developing in 2004, 2005 was the program for these emerging leaders. They'd been on our staff 5 to 10 years. We're not Walmart, but just to use an example, Walmart, I'm sure, has sophisticated leadership development. But I do know that all of their store managers start at entry level. They don't hire outside people to be store managers. And so it takes a store, so somebody at Walmart to become a store manager, it takes them 5 to 10 years. But then imagine that Walmart is identifying who are some of our younger store managers that we see they're going further. Well, that's really what we were doing. Who are some of our younger campus directors or their equivalent in our other divisions who we see going further? And what could we do to intentionally develop them? Well, as we were planning that, one day, one of my colleagues said, hey, what would you think about us recruiting a coach for each one of these leaders? Now, Heather, this was 2005. Leadership coaching wasn't then kind of what it is today. And we actually had to say, hey, we've heard about leadership coaching, but what exactly is it? And she explained it to the best of her ability, and we thought that would be great. And we thought, yeah, that's a great idea. But the next question is, where would we find these coaches? And Heather, I remember saying in that meeting, I think business leaders will do this. Now, my colleagues responded with a fair amount of skepticism, not cynicism, but they were kind of like, hey, Bob, when we're raising money, it's hard to get 15 minutes with these kind of leaders. What makes you think they would have an hour every other week to coach one of our leaders? And I remember saying, well, God didn't write it on my wall. I'm not saying, thus saith the Lord, like I have some special word here. I just have a hunch. And I said, don't we have about a month between now and our next meeting? Yes. Are we serious about this? Yes. Let me go back to Dallas. Our headquarters is in Orlando. That's where we're meeting. Let me go back to the Dallas area and start making phone calls. Because truthfully, we're never going to know if leaders are going to say yes until we start asking them. So I came back here, started making phone calls, and Heather, to my amazement, roughly half the leaders I called almost instantly said, Bob, sign me up, I'm in. It's like the response was so high, I frankly didn't know why. I knew I had not gotten that good in sales overnight. What was it? Well, I now know, but I didn't initially. And what I now know is that so often what I call a big L leader wants to give back. And let's say they contact their pastor. And I don't mean to be unkind here to local pastors. They have the hardest job in the kingdom. But often that local pastor may not know how to make use of the leadership gifting of that member. And so the member calls and says, hey, I sense I just want to be more involved. How might I serve? And the pastor says, well, we need more greeters. We need more ushers. And they're thinking, that's not what I have in mind, but I'm not a prima donna, so sure. But it wasn't what they had in mind. And so when I called and offered this opportunity to come alongside one of our crew leaders, that leader thought, yes, a way to give back out of who God has made me, the experience God has allowed me to have. And so they jumped in. And it's been an amazing program. Heather, we now fast forward. It's now 2025. And we've probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 of our leaders go through one of our coaching programs. And we probably had in the neighborhood of 200 outside leaders coaching our crew leaders. Many of them have re-enlisted. They always say, hey, give me an opportunity to do it again. And we've had some coaches now coach 7 or 8 different crew staff over these 2-year commitments. The comment I most hear from our crew leaders is, Bob, I've never had anyone in my life spend as much time with me as my coach, with no agenda other than wanting to help me win. And they'll reflect on their leader, their director, and say, I love my director, but he or she is busy. And I generally just see them at director meetings. And yeah, if I had an emergency, they'd come on in. And no disrespect here, I love them. But my coach, wow, he or she is the one that's really helping me to grow and to lead. And initially, Heather, I thought that was a one-way street, meaning we were the receivers from these incredible coaches, these outside leaders. And then I began to hear from our coaches saying something like, hey, Bob, I signed up just to be a giver. I didn't know I'd be learning from crew, but I am learning so much. I am a better leader back in my company as a result of this. Thank you. And it was like, well, praise the Lord. It's a win-win.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the nonprofit L&D Collective. Yeah, it sounds like you've had a lot of good results, and we'll get into some of that. I want to rewind a little bit. It's certainly not unique to Crew to promote people because they're a good individual contributor or they're good at one role, and then find that you haven't actually prepared them for that next role. I think that happens all over the place. And so I love that was your driving factor, your pain point that you were trying to solve for. How did you decide bringing in outside coaches, business leaders, cross-sector coaches versus using somebody in-house or encouraging peers to coach each other, or even bringing in like an external coaching partner? What was your thought process? Or like you said, leadership coaching just wasn't as hot button of a topic. So was there a process there for deciding on business leaders?
Heather, today I have strong feelings about this. Initially, I would say we kind of stumbled into this. It wasn't a matter that we thought of all these different options and chose this one based on research. It was kind of like this was the initial idea and we ran with it. One of my favorite verses is man plans his way, but God orders our footsteps. And we look back and say, God ordered our footsteps on this. Let me say that having inside coaches or senior staff be the coaches or peer coaching, none of that's wrong. Please don't hear from me in what I say next that, hey, what we're doing is right and anything else is wrong. That's not the case. But again, as we begin to experience this and we saw a lot of things that were positives that initially we hadn't thought of. But one of the things about these outside leaders, and this happens every time. Last week, we launched our newest coaching team. Well, prior to the start of that, we put together a directory. It's simple. It has the photos and contact information and brief bios of all of our crew leaders and then all of our coaches. And we send that out to all the coaches and participants. Now, they don't know who their coach will be or who they will coach until the first day of the program. And so here's what happens. And we do match women with women and men with men. And so a crew leader will get that. And they know if it's a woman looking at it, she's going to be matched with a woman. She's immediately paging through and looking at the bios of all those coaches. And the general response is, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to step up. I don't want to be embarrassed. These are incredible leaders. And again, I used to think that was a one-way street. And then our coaches said, man, we get that thing. We don't know who we're coaching. We're paging through and looking at the bios and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to embarrass myself. These are incredible leaders. And so they get matched. But there's something about being matched with an outside leader. And you see that, wow, they're doing this pro bono. We did a little Google search to see if we were paying for this, what is the average cost of engaging an executive coach? And on average, it's about $400 an hour. And so obviously we're getting that pro bono. But if you, as a crew leader, realize, wow, if I had to pay for this, it'd be $400 an hour. And with them making a commitment to coach me every other week for 2 years, roughly 50 coaching appointments. Well, 50 times 400 is $20,000. And there's something about when the crew leader understands that and the value, it's, man, I got to show up. I don't want to embarrass myself. They commit to the program. And we've often said this, I don't know how this sounds, Heather, we're not sure that our leaders would have the same respect, even though they should, but for just senior leaders or for a peer coaching relationship. There's something about this outside leader spending valuable time with me that makes me fully engage.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like there's a lot of excitement around the process too, as far as who am I going to be coaching? Who am I going to have as a coach? How are you currently recruiting coaches? You mentioned before you picked up the phone and started calling people, but how does that work now? And then how are you doing that matching on the back end?
Two great questions. Somebody once said, if all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail. Okay. Well, you can laugh at that, but because my major role in crew has become recruiting outside leaders to coach crew leaders, every person I meet, I see as a potential coach. And Heather, frequently I will ask people, hey, tell me your story. And I love hearing people's stories. Well, something I know is that we tend to, if I walk in and say, good morning, Heather, how are you? You're likely to say, fine, Bob, how are you? And so when I ask somebody, hey, tell me your story, after I hear their story, they'll often say, well, Bob, tell me your story. And in my story, I shared several things, but one of the things is about the coaching program. And Heather, I'm waiting then. It doesn't always happen, but quite frequently people say, well, Bob, do you need more coaches? And I'll say, well, would that be of interest to you? It's not like I have a ledger and keep track. Nobody owes me anything. But so often those conversations lead to, hey, yeah, if you need another coach, let me know. And I say, I'd be delighted to invite you. The first thing I'll share is the dates for the launch. And if those aren't available, you won't even have to pray about it. Another thing that's happened, Heather, and I only saw this in the rearview mirror, but when I launched my blog, I had no idea that it would, I should have, but I didn't really anticipate how it would enlarge and blossom my network. And on my blog, I don't share or recruit coaches directly, but I've met so many people as a result. And again, tell me your story. They often reply, tell me your story, and I share about coaching. And again, I'm waiting to hear, do they have an interest? Again, no offense if they don't. But that's how I've really gone about. And then, there's another principle. Use the team to build the team. And so often our current coaches, when I say, hey, who do you know that you think this would be ideal for them? They'd be a great coach. And many times our coaches say, oh, Bob, yeah, I've got somebody or I've got several. And so just that principle of use the team to build the team.
That's good. Good stuff. So you've been running the program now for a little bit. I'm not sure. You said you started planning in 2004. I'm not sure when it launched.
20 years.
20 years. Okay. So what benefits have you seen since launching the coaching program? I know you mentioned that coaches, that people being coached are definitely feeling the support, feel like they have a close relationship with their coach and can go to them with things. You said your coaches are learning too, and obviously there's a cost efficiency there as well. But what benefits have you seen from this coaching program?
Heather, there are so many benefits. I'm not sure I can think of them all. But when I speak, I share that for most of my career, I was a benevolent dictator. And what I mean by that is I thought the job of a leader was to figure out what needs to be done and tell my staff what to do. And I say benevolent, I said please and thank you. And I think that paradigm of leadership, I'm not unique. Let's put it this way. I'm not unique. And one of the things that we also, I think, at times get used to is even as a leader, we have people we report to and we go to them and say, what should I do? And we're hoping they will tell us what it is we need to do. Well, in our coaching program, the development of a leader by saying, Heather comes with a problem. And I said, well, Heather, say more about that. And Heather does. And I said, well, Heather, what do you think you might do? And Heather shares. Well, Heather, that's one option. What be some other options? And Heather's thinking, and Heather, of those options, which one do you think would be best then? And by actually allowing Heather to solve her own problem, here's another benefit. In fact, when I'm sharing about, you see this one book behind me, 340 questions Jesus asked, I say, I ask a lot of questions because I don't know the answers. Jesus never asked a question because he didn't know the answer. So why did he ask? Might he have known, and again, another angle, did he want to see lives change? Well, of course. But did Jesus know that if he asked a question that an individual answered, that their answer had a greater probability of changing them than if he said, let me tell you? Why? Because they thought their answer was their idea. And so when a leader is being asked questions by their coach, the plan they come up with is their idea. And yes, the coach is trained to ask clarifying questions and, hey, what would be the next step? And our coaches are also trained to respond if they hear a weasel word. A weasel response is like saying, well, I'm really going to try. Well, that great philosopher from Star Wars, Yoda, a famous quote is, there is no try, do or do not. And so our coaches from time to time will share that and in a fun way. And the crew leader will say, okay, you caught me. Yeah. And the coach will say again, how much by when? What is it you're actually wanting to commit to? Saying you're going to try sounds like something, but it actually doesn't have any substance to it. And so being developed in that way where you're having to think, but then you end up owning it. And then here's another benefit. Our crew leaders also need to coach their people. And so as they experience coaching, they get better at coaching and acknowledge that. And so that's another bounce. Heather, if I could, let me share another aspect. We actually say there's two pillars to our leadership development program. One is coaching. The other one is what we call action learning. In action learning, we put 4 or 5 of our crew leaders on an action learning team. And this team actually functions for 6 months. And that team is given a challenge, a real challenge, not a case study, not a made up kind of thing. They're given a real challenge facing crew. And they have 6 months to do research, due diligence, to then propose to the leadership of crew what we might do to solve that challenge. Well, what that experience allows them to do is, in essence, go sit at the desk of a leader much higher in the organization than them, and to have to think, how would we solve this? And that whole experience of being on that action learning team, having to figure out the problem, come up with a solution, and how you'd roll that out and execute on it, the opportunity then to interact with leaders at a higher level. Many of our staff that have gone through this have said, wow, that experience has so prepared me to lead at a higher level. So action learning and coaching, those two things together.
That is so, so good. I love that you're combining both the coaching with the action learning. Bob, this has been so helpful, so just fun to see what another organization is doing, how you all as a faith-based organization are bringing in people, business leaders to coach. And again, really looking at how do you solve for that pain point of preparing people for that next role. So thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for joining me today. And I can't wait for this episode to go live.
Heather, it's been a delight. Thank you for inviting me.
Bob shared so much good insight into how Crew, a faith nonprofit, solved a real problem that so many organizations face. And I love the creativity of engaging business leaders as coaches to help solve the problem. Chances are your organization has faced a similar problem. It's far too common to not develop new managers into their new roles. If you want more information about this program, or if you want to volunteer to be a coach, reach out to Bob. I'll drop his contact information in the show notes. And hopefully you've learned a little something that you can take and apply in your organization as you develop your leaders. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good. Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.